Baruchot habaot, ladies, and welcome to another edition of our weekly Torah classes. Whether you're logging on to Torah Anytime or ohelsarah.com, as you know, we appreciate your dedication, your devotion and commitment to Torah studying, to your neshama, to the elevation of your avodat kodesh. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm sure, is looking down from his throne of glory, and his joy is overwhelming. His joy is overwhelming when he sees so many women in Klal Yisrael, the torch bearers of Am Yisrael, the ones who are going to bring the Geula bekarov mamash, that with everything that's going on in the world, with the confusion and the havoc, with the busy lives that you run, that you manage, with all the work that you're invested in, you still manage to give time to the Ribono Shel Olam and to his words of wisdom and truth. You have no clue how much happiness, how much simcha you create in the Ribono Shel Olam, for him, about him. It's just an immense joy, I'm sure, that Hashem feels, especially during this very dark time in the world, not just in Am Yisrael, in the world. I would like to dedicate this shiur to a man in his 40s who sadly got sick from corona and is currently, I think he's on a respirator of some sort in the hospital. We're all looking to pray for him and hope that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will grant him a refuah shlema bekarov mamash, to Avraham ben Yocheved shav refuah shlema bimhera, so that his wife Yardena can enjoy his presence once more in the house. Very special woman from our Kehillah here in Eretz Yisrael, in Netanya, where our Rav and Rebbitzin are located. I was supposed to, as you know, travel to the United States last week, and the night before the flight, they canceled the flight, and the government of Israel decided to close the airports for another 2 weeks. And so here I am, still in Eretz Yisrael. HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided he still wants me here, which I don't mind. More Kedusha, to absorb more Kedusha. And Be'ezat Hashem, I hope that Be'ezat Hashem will be able to fly back this coming Sunday. Not sure, with everything that's going on in the world. Every day is a day unto itself. Nobody knows what today brings. Nobody knows what tomorrow brings. So I guess you'll know next week if I made it to America or not. And of course, you know I'm coming for many reasons, but primarily because of our Purim campaign, which I'll talk about very soon. But I do want to take the time right now to thank the last 4 people who donated to that Purim campaign. First of all, thank you so much to Heidi Cohen, to Erica Schaffer, who donated. Thank you so much. To Gloria Ben Zacharia. Thank you so much. To Crystal Robinson, who is such an avid supporter of Ohel Sarah. We thank you so very much. And to all the women in general who have been reaching out to us in support of this tremendous cause. We're going to talk about it soon. But right now I want to get things going because we have a lot to do. And of course, anybody who wants to take notes, go grab yourself a notebook, a pen, and you could take notes on this, because this is a lesson that I think you will want to remember and maybe even pass it on to somebody else. Or you could simply, copy the link, whether it's the YouTube link that we have, the Sarah link, or the Torah Anytime link, and forward it. It's always so very important that you share Torah with other women. Ladies, this week's Parshat Terumah, discusses the building of the Mishkan. In last week's shiur, we learned that the construction of the Mishkan was a very expensive venture. There were many expenses, including the furnishings in the Mishkan that had to be supplied. And all these items were dependent on the generosity of Bnei Israel, who made their annual donations towards the Mishkan. We spoke about this last week. And Baruch Hashem, Am Yisrael rose to the occasion and helped in this regard. Now, the Torah lists 11 different kinds of donations that were made and needed for the construction of the Mishkan. Among those 11 raw materials was zahav, v'chesef, unechoshet, gold, silver, and copper. And last on the list were the avnei shoham and meluim, which were the precious stones that were on the breastplate and shoulders of the Cohen Gadol. Interestingly, the Torah HaKadosha lists them in specific order of donations. And the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, Alav Shalom, writes that if we want to measure the value of these items, we should know that the most expensive and valuable item that was donated was not gold, it was not zahav. Although today the price of gold is at, I think, $1,800 an ounce, if I'm not mistaken, Chachamim tell us that it was the avnei shoham and avnei meluim. It was those precious stones that rested on the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol and on his shoulders, that were on the Choshen Mishpat and the Ephod, that were indeed the most valuable commodities among the donations of the Mishkan. As a matter of fact, the Gemara of Kiddushin tells us that when the Chachamim wanted to purchase these stones, the price for them was 800,000 dinar, which was an exorbitant amount of money. So the Or HaChaim HaKadosh asks, why then are these precious stones listed last in the item of donations? If the Torah is prioritizing these treasured stones and telling us that they were the most valuable, why would it begin the list with the donations of the less valuable items like zahav, chesef, unechoshet, and list the donations of these precious and more valuable stones last on the list? That's the question of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. And he provides us with 3 answers. The first of which is a halachic answer. He says, halachically, since those precious stones were mainly being used for the clothing of the Kohen Gadol, and since his garments are not considered as holy as the furnishings of all the items that were in the Mishkan, interestingly enough, therefore, when providing a list of what all these materials were used for, we need to mention the Klei Kodesh, all the vessels and all the furnishings in the Mishkan that contain a greater sanctity than the clothing of the Kohen Gadol. So although we know that those precious stones were extremely valuable and expensive, but since they were used for the clothing of the Kohen Gadol, halachically, it was less important to mention them first, and they're actually listed last. That's the first answer of the Or HaChaim. The second answer is that it isn't so much the amount of the donation which is important, but rather the effort involved when making a donation. It seems that the donation of the precious stones was an effortless donation. Why? The Midrash asks, well, where did these donors acquire the precious stones from? Well, we know that in the Midbar, there were no jewelry stores. So where did these stones come from? So the Midrash tells us that one day, when the man was falling from the heavens, together with the man, these precious stones, these avanim, came down from the Shamayim as well. They were a gift from the heavens. So what happened? The Nesi'im and Am Yisrael were the ones who made this donation, by the way. One day, as they went out to collect the man, they saw these precious stones on the sand bed of the Midbar, and they collected them and went home. So from a standpoint of sacrifice and great effort, hishtadlut, it was an easy donation to offer on the part of the Nesi'im. It was money that was found down on the ground, so to speak. Whereas the man who donated the gold actually went to retrieve it from his neighbor in Mitzrayim. He carried it with great effort out of Egypt. So there was toil involved in acquiring that gold. But the contribution that the Nesi'im made was what we would call a windfall profit. That's what made it a very easy donation to offer. And by the way, that idea could be turned into an entire shiur all on its own, because the Torah doesn't only measure the quantity of a donation, ladies. In the calculation of whether or not the mitzvah we did is considered great or not, is the effort that was applied when engaging in that mitzvah. Two friends could be involved in the same deed, but one does it in a very easy and laid back kind of way, while the other applies himself just a little bit more. And suddenly the mitzvah looks different for the second person who applied himself, as well as the first person who did not apply himself so much. The Or HaChaim says that the difference is so obvious that the first person who did not apply himself so much is number 11 on the list. You know, many of us try to do mitzvot, sadly, in the easiest, quickest, and most convenient manner. Many of us look for the least effort possible when engaging in a mitzvah. But when it concerns the mitzvot, ladies, your effort is going to affect the bottom line. For example, we know how much emphasis the Rabbanim place on how one learns Torah. Two men can study the same Gemara, and each receives a completely different reward that's dependent on the effort that each of them made. The Holy Maharil alav shalom said that one time he became upset at the Talmidim in the yeshiva. Why? Well, it seems that they invented a lazy Susie type contraption. What's a lazy Susie? It's a round item made out of wood, glass, or some other material, and it can swivel around from one side to the next. It's got little like rolling balls underneath. It's like a mini table that can turn. It can turn this way, it can turn that way. So what did the students do? They went to the library. They took out all the books that they thought they'd need. They put it on this lazy Susan in the center of the table. They all sat around the table. And any time any one of them needed a certain book, they simply turned the table, the lazy Susie type of thing, in that student's direction, and the person had easy access to the Sefer. The Maharil, when he found out about it, he was so upset with this invention of theirs that he told these students, what is this new and modern invention that's obviously made as a convenience for the study of Torah? You should know, he told them, that when you get up and actually walk to the library full of books and you look for the Sefer, you take it off the shelf and you carry it back to your seat, that effort is calculated into your learning and you receive a reward for that. There's something to be said about learning Torah when one toils for it and when it's difficult for them. And by the way, that includes the conditions in which a person studies Torah. You can have a person who doesn't have so much money, isn't making a substantial salary, doesn't have the luxuries or amenities that his wealthy neighbor has, yet he's taking the time under poor and strenuous condition and making a great effort in order to study Torah. This man is studying under such raw conditions that his limud and his neighbor's limud is not the same at all. It's not the same at all. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to go now out of your way to suffer when you learn Torah. No. But the Rabbanim do tell us that your amelut, the amount of effort and difficulty that you placed into a good deed, into a mitzvah, into the learning of Torah, is held in greater esteem in Shamayim. And that's why the Nesi'im's donation of the rare and precious stones were mentioned last on the list, which means that on the list of quantity, they were the donors who pledged the most, the Nesi'im. But in the area of amelut, it was an effortless donation. They simply took the precious stones that fell from Shamayim and they brought it to Moshe Rabbeinu alav shalom. That effortless donation put their contribution at the end of the list. So that's the Or HaChaim's second answer. The third answer is what I want to share with you, and I want to learn more deeply about it. I'm going to quote you the words of the Or HaChaim, some of it in Lashon Kodesh, and some of it I'm going to continue in English. I'm going to quote you his words and then we're going to elaborate on the matter. He writes about the Midrash that we mentioned earlier, and he says the following: כי לצד שמצינו שהנשיאים הביאו אותם באחרונה, כשראו שהביאו ישראל כל צורך למשכן. Which means, the reason why the donation of the Nesi'im was listed last was because the Nesi'im brought their donations only after all of Am Yisrael had contributed theirs. They were the last ones to donate their nedava. And Chachamim tell us why they were among the last to donate. It wasn't because they were miserly, or because they were waiting, oh, let's wait for the last moment to see whether or not our donations are even going to be necessary, because they were so stingy or greedy. The Midrash actually tells us that the reason why they were the last to donate was because they were willing to underwrite the entire project. You know what that means? It means that if whatever Am Yisrael donated would not have been enough to finance all the expenses of the construction of the Mishkan, the Nesi'im were willing to cover the difference. And that is one of the most generous and noble gestures that these Nesi'im could have made. That means if Moshe Rabbeinu would have come to them and said, listen, Baruch Hashem, we collected a nice amount of money, but sadly we're short $2 million for the project, the Nesi'im would have funded that $2 million. So they waited until the end in order to hear the grand total of what was collected, so that they could cover the rest of the funds that were needed. And that was indeed a tremendous level of generosity. However, when Chachamim write about the donations of these Nesi'im, their names are spelled Chaser Yud. Usually, we spell the word Nesi'im, if you're looking at your screens right now, with a Yud. Nun, Sin, Yud, Aleph, Yud, Mem. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu took away one of the Yuds, and it's spelled as if it reads Nesi'am. Nun, Sin, Yud, Aleph, Mem. There's a missing Yud. And the Gemara teaches us that whenever we see that a letter has been removed from a person's name or from a title, it means that that name has become deficient, since the person has become deficient in some way. They were lacking something. Question is, what were the Nesi'im lacking? Chachamim say that they were lacking the zeal, the zrizut, the enthusiasm, the itlahavut, and the excitement that they should have felt to donate for such a holy cause. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells you that He wants you to contribute something towards the construction of the Mishkan, and you arrive last. If you would have had the proper attitude and excitement, you would have been first online. So the fact that they delayed their donation was considered a chesaron, a deficiency of a sort. Therefore, God took away the letter Yud from their title, Nesi'im. Now, you might say, well, big deal. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu took away one letter. He took away the Yud. So what? How does that hurt them in any way? Ladies, we're not going to get into the Kabbalistic details of how it hurts them. But I will tell you this. The Mekubalim tell us that it's a very big deal when a letter is removed from a person's name. How do we know that? Because the Midrash tells us that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu removed the letter Yud from Sarai's name, Aleh Shalom, that Yud, it went crazy. It went crazy. The letter Yud approached HaKadosh Baruch Hu and I was begging Hashem, Hashem, how could you do this to me? I was part of the Torah and now you're removing me from it? Hashem was so like overwhelmed with emotions that he told the Yud, you're right. You have a very valid claim. And because you cared so much about it, not only am I going to put you back in the Torah, but I'm going to grant you an upgrade. In Sarai's name, your letter appeared at the end. You sat all the way in the back. But now you're going to sit in first class. I'm going to place you into Yehoshua's name. You're going to appear at the beginning of his name all the way in the front. Oh, the letter Yud felt so happy, so compensated. So we see from this one incident over here that it's not a small item to remove letters from a name or title in the Torah. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu removed the letter Yud from the title of the Nesi'im, that was a huge Musar Haskel for them. That was HaKadosh Baruch Hu's way of telling them that they were chaser, they were incomplete, that there was something missing, lacking in the manner in which they contributed their nedava, their contribution. What was chaser? What was lacking? Their zeal, their zrizut, and their hitlahavut. They were the last ones to come. They were the last ones to come. Now, ladies, I'm a little confused, to be very honest with you. But we know why they came last. It was out of their goodness, out of kindness, and their benevolence. They came last because they wanted to donate the remainder of the funds needed after Am Yisrael made their donations. So why are they being punished for this kind act? And the Baalei Musar explained the following. In truth, if we were able to look deep, deep down into the hearts of these Nesi'im, we would see that there was a little bit of laziness that affected them. 99% of their action was done for the reasons that we mentioned. Wonderful. But still, there was a lack of enthusiasm mixed with a little bit of laziness. And it's for that laziness that they were penalized. Now, if you were to ask them, what, could this be true? Were you a shtickle lazy? They'd say, us? Not at all. We're not being lazy. But the Ribono Shel Olam, the creator of the world and of the people down below, who's able to see into the hearts and minds of people, saw that they waited too long to donate because there was a little laziness involved. And that's why he had claims against them. That's how careful we need to be when we're engaged in mitzvot. Because we could fool ourselves into thinking that we did the mitzvah perfectly. Our Yetzer Hara is always conjuring up all kinds of justifications and excuses for the manner in which we did the mitzvot that make us think we did them perfectly. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows that perhaps we were simply lazy. As a matter of fact, in his introduction to a sefer, Chovot HaLevavot, and that sefer is the magnum opus of Musar, Rabbeinu Bachya alav hashalom, a Torah giant, writes that he was contemplating about whether or not he should write this sefer. He was wondering if he's worthy to write it, because it's a very deep sefer that discusses lofty matters. So Rabbeinu Bachya questioned his own legitimacy, if he can write the book or not. But listen to what he writes after he scrutinized himself and wondered, why am I hesitating to write this sefer? I'm going to quote you his lashon, I'm going to quote you his words. Listen what he says. וכאשר חשבתי להסיר את מסע הטרחה הזאת מעליי, when I thought to unburden myself from this task of writing the book, ולחדול מלחבר את הספר, and refrain from writing this book, חזרתי, I changed my mind. וחשבתי בנפשי, and I thought inside myself and realized שהיא, my nefesh, בוחרת במנוחה ועצלות. It wasn't humility, says Rabbeinu Bachya, that was stopping me from writing the sefer. That was the guise of the Yetzer Hara. The real motivating factor of why I was hesitating to write this book, plain Parshat, because it was too hard. My nefesh, my animalistic being, my body wanted rest, and it was simply lazy. The laziness inside of me, he says, I'm quoting you his words in English, the laziness inside of me was speaking very loudly. But once I was able to pinpoint that it was my laziness, I girded myself like a lion and told myself that I need to be a gibor. And although I may think I'm not worthy, Hashem will provide me with siyata dishmaya. And Baruch Hashem, that I did rise to the occasion and I wrote this sefer. Wow. A giant in Torah like Rabbeinu Bachya is telling us that even somebody like him can be fooled by the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara can fool us by soliciting very quote-unquote valid reasons for why we don't want to do something, when ultimately and truthfully the reason why we don't do it is because of our laziness. Many times that's the underlying reason of why we're not accomplishing things in life. The Holy Ramchal, alav hashalom, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, writes in his Sefer Mesilat Yesharim that human beings by nature are lazy. That should not be a chidush to anybody, because we were created from one of the laziest elements on the earth. We were created from the afar haaretz, the adama. Is there a more lazy element than afar, than the dust of the earth? What does it do all day long, the afar? It sleeps. It lies on the ground. It just sits there. The human being was created from the afar. Hence, the nature of the human being is not to exert energy or move too much. Just the nature is to sit. Therefore, we offer ourselves a lot of excuses of why we should put off a good deed, an action, or a mitzvah. Let's push it off to tomorrow. We tell ourselves, why fulfilling this action, it's not so important right now. And many times, we even give ourselves religious excuses of why we can't get things done. Therefore, the Nesi'im deluded themselves into thinking that the reason why they're coming last is out of their generous and benevolent spirit. They told themselves that since they're going to fund the remainder of the project, they can come last, they can wait. That was true, but only on the surface. Inwardly, Hashem realized that there was another truth. Hashem saw that deep down part of them was simply lazy to make the effort to come first. They didn't want to take these precious stones and walk all the way to the area of the Mishkan. Kadosh Baruch Hu saw this and he said, because of your atzlut, because of your laziness, you're going to be penalized. And what God was teaching us was the following. You could be the biggest donor, but when it's lacking the excitement and the zrizut, the quickness, you could suddenly be pushed down to the bottom of the list. Which means that the mitzvah suddenly becomes compromised. And that's an amazing yesod if you think about it. We're being taught that a mitzvah done with excitement and zrizut determines whether you're going to be first on the list or last on the list. As a matter of fact, regarding the subject of doing mitzvot with zrizut, with swiftness, the Torah Kedosha in Sefer Bereshit tells us that after Noach and his entire family came out of the teva, out of the ark after the flood, he became drunk, and sadly his grandson began to take advantage of him in ways that are not very pleasant. And as a result of that horrible situation, Noach was left laying on the floor in a very revealing and disrespectful manner. Noach's two grandsons, Shem and Yefet, saw him in this undignified state. So they grabbed the blanket and they covered their grandfather, in order to maintain his dignity. And the pasuk concerning this situation says, Vayikach Shem Vayefet. And Shem Vayefet took. Interesting. There were two of them, and yet the pasuk says the word Vayikach, which means and he took. The pasuk should have read Vayikhu Shem Vayefet, and they took. Why does the Torah use the word Vayikach and he took if both Shem Vayefet, Shem and Yefet took the blanket? So Rashi HaKadosh Alav Shalom quotes the Gemara that says that actually the reason why it's being said in this fashion is because Shem was a little more zealous than Yefet. When they were both running in order to cover their grandfather, Shem ran a little faster than his brother. He got to his grandfather first. Yefet was just like a step behind, trailing him. He wasn't as zariz. He was hesitating somewhat. And that's why the greater reward for that mitzvah is granted to Shem more than Yefet, which is why the pasuk says Vayikach. It's referring as if only one person. So although Yefet was involved in the mitzvah of kavod habriot, he still came in second. And it's not literally second, but rather the mitzvah looks different for Yefet than it does for Shem, because he didn't do it with the same zeal that his brother did. And I'm going to prove to you that what Chachamim are saying is right, because they were both rewarded for the great deed that they did with their grandfather. God rewards everybody midah keneged midah. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, they covered their grandfather, therefore they will also be covered. Shem received the mitzvah of wearing a talit, a prayer shawl. As you know, the Jewish people are the descendants of Shem. All the Jews who pray in the morning, the men, and they pray on Shabbat, they cover themselves with a talit gadol, and what's called a talit katan, which is referred to as tzitzit. The Gemara informs us that the wearing of the talit is equivalent to all 613 mitzvot in the Torah Kedosha. That's how great the mitzvah of talit is. Can you imagine? And we receive this eternal mitzvah that covers our body in life as well as in death because of what our ancestor Shem did. The one who covers gets covered. What was Yefet's reward? Yefet was rewarded with a great nation that would descend from him called Gog uMagog. We didn't know that Gog uMagog descended from Yefet. And we don't know who the nations of Gog and Magog are. But what we do know is that they are the key players in the final world war, Be'achit HaYamim, in the end of days. So Bnei Yefet, the descendants of Yefet, are going to be involved in this war, and they're going to lose the battle. This we know. This is a nevuah, a prophecy. But Chachamim tell us that the good news for Yefet's descendants, Gog uMagog, is that all their casualties of war will have the merit to be buried. To be buried. It's a zchut to be buried properly. So the one who covered will merit that his descendants will be covered by the earth. Their bodies are not going to be strewn across the battleground. And I ask you, which one of these two brothers, Shem and Yefet, received the better deal? Think about it. I mean, one received the eternal mitzvah of talit, while the other received the mitzvah of burial after death. That's pretty significant difference. One is an eternal mitzvah, which is everlasting. The other one is a death. And I want to know why there's such a disparity in the reward given to these two men when they both engaged in the same mitzvah. But ladies, on the spiritual barometer of zrizut, of zealousness, speed, and diligence, which only Hashem can measure, he felt that Shem fulfilled the mitzvah in the proper manner. And some of us cannot understand this because, we're talking about a difference of a second or two, one step or two faster than the other person. Why should that make such a difference? I want to explain it to you in a way that you might understand. As we know, the Olympics, which was interestingly originated by one of Yefet's descendants, the Greeks, the Olympics takes place every 2 years, interchanging between the winter and summer games. It's a world competition where the best athletes are rewarded for whatever sport they're involved in. One of those competitions is called the slalom. It's a skiing competition where the one who's skiing is taken to the top of a mountain, very tall mountain, and he's literally dropped vertically from the top. He races down the mountain between poles and gates that are spaced very close to one another. And he has to do it without falling or breaking his skis. The object of this competition is obviously to arrive at the finish line, which is at the bottom of the mountain. And how do they determine who's first, who gets there first? Well, they time each skier. The fastest time renders you the winner of the gold medal. Now, if you ever watched this competition on any monitor, you're going to notice that when the skier begins to descend the mountain, they put a timer on the screen for us to see. They want us to see how fast he's skiing. And it's not a regular stopwatch that some of us use to measure the minutes and the seconds. No. Their stopwatch goes down to the seconds, all the way down to thousands of a second. And the difference between the guy who won the gold medal and the one who came in third, ladies, could very well be a fraction of a second. It's not even a second. It's a fraction of a second. And guess what? The loser understands this. The loser understands this. So in the world of the Olympics, they all understand that a person's destiny, his success, and his victory could be measured in small numbers, in fractions of a second. And when we talk about mitzvot, lehavdil elef alfei avdalot, it's the same way. It's the same way. I'm going to give you an example of this in the area of ruchaniut. And we all know what the halakha says concerning a minyan, and being among the first 10 to join a quorum, a minyan at the Bet HaKnesset. You know that there's a difference between man number 10 and man number 9? The difference is immeasurable. And with number 8, it's even a greater difference than 9 and 10. So you could imagine, guy number 7, the guy number 6, guy number 5, and so on and so forth. The Gemara of Berachot says that man number 1, the one who arrives first, is notel sachar keneged kulam. He receives the reward of all those who came after him. You know why? For 2 very important reasons. Reason number 1 is the wording of the Gemara itself. I'll read you the wording. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan, alav shalom. Rabbi Yochanan says, "B'sha'a she'akadosh baruch hu ba bebet hakneset." At the moment that God comes to the synagogue, velo matza ba'asara, and he does not find even 10 men there, miyad hu koes, he is immediately filled with anger. Shene'emar, just as it states in Yeshaya HaNavi, Madua bati ve'en ish, for what reason have I come when there is no one present? Karati ve'en oneh, I have called out and there is no one who answers. How sad is that, ladies? How sad is that? Therefore, the holy Meiri, alav shalom, comments on this Gemara and says, Le'olam yehiyu bnei hakahal zrizim lavo labet hakneset. The congregation should always try to be quick to arrive to shul, to the synagogue. Ad sheyu sham asara, so that at least 10 men are present when the time comes to begin the tefillot, the prayers. And why is that so important? Because if one does not hurry to come to shul on time, to be among the minyan of men needed for the tefillah, listen to the words of the Meiri, Umore al bnei ota ha'ir, it demonstrates something concerning the people of that city. Shelibam meruchak me'avat Hashem yitbarach. It shows that their hearts are very far, very distant from loving God as they should love Him. Ve'harichuk hu hakas hagadol. And it's this distance that creates anger in God. Amazing. So Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, alav shalom, in the Gemara of Berachot, says the following. I quote his words to you. He says, so I'll tell you first in English, and then his words in Lashon Kodesh. He says, a person should always rise early in order to arrive to shul, so that he could be counted among the first of the minyan, among the first 10. ואפילו 100 באים אחריו, and even if 100 people are going to arrive after him, קיבל עליו שכר כולם. He's going to receive the reward of all of those people. Wow. So the first thing we learn is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to the Bet HaKnesset. The Shekhinah comes down to the shul and waits to see and feels your presence there. And when nobody is there to greet the Shekhinah, this is something that angers Hashem. This is something that displays a rechuk, a distance in the relationship. And secondly, we learn the importance of zrizut and how important it is to hurry to do a mitzvah, to have zeal and diligence. The Ateret Zekenim, alav shalom, states the following in his sefer. He writes like this: Kol ha-makdim, whoever comes to shul early, hu yoter karov leshoresh ha-kedusha, is closer to the roots of holiness. Ve'acharonim, and those who are among the last to come to shul, obviously we're talking about the men, Yonkim me'anfei anafim, they are merely suckling from the branches. In other words, they're not receiving all the positive influences directly from the root of the Kedusha, but rather from the branches. Yesh be'anshe ma'aseh, and there are some great and holy people, shenohagim, whose custom it is, shebe'oto hayom, she'en holchim liyot ma'asara harishonim, that on the days that they are not able to be among the first 10 to arrive to shul, what do? Mit'anim. They fast on those days. Wow. Wow, ladies. You understand what I just read to you? There were people who felt so badly that they weren't from the first 10 to make it to shul, that they fasted on that day. We know people who don't make it to shul at all, and they eat 3 hearty meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and supper, and they don't feel bad at all. Do you know what this means? You know what this means? It means that the 11th man who showed up even at the next minyan, which is very early in the morning, he still missed the boat. He still missed the boat. If he was like these great people, he would fast that day because he wasn't from the first 10 men to make it to the next minyan, even though it's the nets. Wow, what a tremendous level we're talking about. But the point is, that's the inyan of zrizut. That's the difference between winning the gold medal and coming in third. Question is, how serious is this midah of zrizut? How serious is it? Well, we know that Bilam Harasha was the most ardent anti-Semite of all time. He came to curse the Jewish people. He woke up early in the morning and saddled his own donkey. And that was unbefitting for a man of his stature. He was wealthy enough to have his servants saddle his donkey. But knowing Bilam as we do from the Chachamim, it wasn't so unbefitting, because we know he was a degenerate who was engaged in all kinds of immoral activities. As a matter of fact, the Gemara tells us that he did more than just saddle his donkey, if you know what I mean. He was intimate with his donkey, if you could believe it or not. I mean, but anyway, he wakes up early in the morning and saddles his own donkey. And the Gemara comments on this and deems him a rasha, an evildoer. Why? The Gemara tells us that Bilam thought that by being diligent, having zrizut, and waking up early in the morning, he's going to be successful in cursing the Jewish people. Says the Gemara, Rasha, you evildoer, kvar kadamcha Avraham avihem. Avraham, the forefather of the Jewish people, already beat you to it, Bilam. Shene'emar, just as it says in Sefer Bereshit, Vayashkem Avraham baboker, Vayachavosh et chamoro. And Avraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey. The Gemara tells Bilam, you Rasha, you think you're the only one who ever woke up early in the morning? Avraham Avinu was the first one to rise so early. When? On the day that he went to sacrifice his son Yitzhak. You understand what our Rabbanim are telling us over here, ladies? Bilam, his anti-Semitism was so full of passion that he did things that were not within his normal class or status. Think about it. Imagine you travel to Washington, D.C., and you stop at an Exxon gas station in order to fill up gas. And who do you see there filling up his own limousine's gas tank? You see President Trump over there before he left office. President Trump is standing there filling up gas. What, should the president engage in such a menial task? No, it's not proper kavod. It's not respectful for the position that he holds in office. Bilam was considered to be the Goyim's greatest prophet. And he saddles his own donkey? But he was diligent because he wanted to succeed in his mission. And although his evil plans did not come to fruition, God still values the diligence of a person. And guess what? Bilam could have very well succeeded were it not for Avraham Avinu's diligence that preceded his. And when did he precede him? Years before, when Avraham Avinu was commanded to sacrifice his son. So you know what neutralized Bilam's ability to curse us? Not Akedat Yitzhak. It's the zrizut. It's the diligence and the zeal that Avraham displayed when he woke up early that morning to go to the Akedah. That's what saved us. Which means, it's a little scary, but think about it, which means that had Avraham Avinu woken up later that day and delayed the mitzvah and accomplished the Akedah much later on that day, there may have been nothing wrong with that at all. At least he did what Hashem told him to do. But if Bilam woke up at 6 a.m. due to his diligence, he would have had the power to curse us. There would have been nothing to neutralize his diligence in succeeding in his mission. And even though Avraham would have marched on to fulfill God's command of the Akedah later on during the day, but because he didn't do it with diligence, with zrizut, that would have made all the difference in the world in our case over here. In order to get the gold medal, the mitzvah has to be accomplished in a manner that displays zrizut, diligence without delay. And Baruch Hashem, that we have such a holy forefather. He did not delay. He woke up very early in order to fulfill God's will, no matter how difficult that will was. So what neutralized Bilam's curse? Vayashkem Avraham baboker. It was his diligence for the mitzvah, Avraham's diligence. Ladies, there are certain mitzvot, as you know, that are time-bound. Our entire religion is based on a timely schedule. Shabbat, for example, is bound by a specific time. You have to light the Shabbat candles at a certain time of the day in order to usher in the Shabbat properly. If we are not diligent and delay this mitzvah, if we wait until the last minute, we lost that allotted time and the importance of that time. Meaning, if you were supposed to light candles at 4:56 p.m. and you lit at 4:59 p.m., you cannot turn back the clock anymore. 4:56 has come and gone. You cannot make up the time that you lost by not lighting those candles on time. The Shabbat comes, and with it, it brings many opportunities. If we don't act quickly and diligently, we lose the opportunity to respond accordingly. Because Shabbat is bound by time, it's one of those items that's eternally lost if we don't respond to it in a timely manner. We have to be cognizant of these things because the losses as well as the benefits are great. That's why David HaMelech, alav shalom, writes in Sefer Tehillim, Chashti velo itma'amati lishmor mitzvotecha. I hastened and did not delay to keep your commandments. What was David HaMelech saying? He was saying, Chashti, I did the mitzvot in a diligent manner. I hastened to do them. Velo itma'amati, I did not delay to do the mitzvot. Very interesting. David HaMelech chooses to use a double language in this pasuk. Chashti, I hastened. Velo itma'amati, and I did not delay. Interesting. Hastening and not delaying are virtually the same thing. Why the double language over here? Lashon kaful. Why? So, one interpretation could be as follows. David HaMelech says like this. Chashti. I ran to do the mitzvot in the most diligent of manners. But running to do the mitzvot is not an indication that you're zealous, that you have zrizut, real zrizut, because it could very well be that the reason why you're running, why you're chash, is because you're late. You're lagging behind, you gotta catch up. A person could be running to shul, and you're looking at him and says, wow, look, he's running. But yeah, the reason he's running is because the tefillah already started. So David HaMelech says, Chashti, I ran to do the mitzvot. But I want to be clear. Lo itma'amati. I did not delay in doing them. I was on time and I was on target. Chachamim tell us that even in his old age, David HaMelech's ability to engage in the mitzvot, chashti, to hasten and to do it with great zeal, where did that come from? Where did that come from? And we're told, the Midrash tells us that it was due to the fact that since early childhood, David HaMelech is telling us, Lo itma'amati, since he was little, he didn't delay. He taught himself since he was young to respond quickly and with excitement. And by the way, that's a lesson in Chinuch HaYeladim. You should take that to heart. Chachamim tell us that it's not always the best spiritual education when you allow your child to sleep late, you have rachamim, let him sleep late, to attend shul later or not at all, to wait until tomorrow to help. Chachamim say this is not good training because the child develops a laziness that he grows into even in his adult life. The Gemara of Sukkah tells us about a certain group of Kohanim who did their rounds of service in the Bet HaMikdash on a particular week. That group was called Bilga. The Rabbanim penalized the Bilga family by banning them from doing their work in the Bet HaMikdash. Why? Why were they penalized? We're told that the reason why they were penalized was because they used to show up late for the Avodat HaKodesh, for their work service in the Bet HaMikdash. You're working in the holiest temple on earth, and you have to be there early in the morning for a job only you could do. You are the Cohen, and you show up at 8:30 in the morning. The Rabbanim were upset that the Bilga family was not doing the Avodah of Kehuna properly and in a timely fashion. Therefore, they were prevented from doing their service as a penalty for not taking their work seriously. For tzaddikim, time was always of the essence, and punctuality was very important. And that's what makes the mitzvah more qualitative, to the extent that, listen to what the Gemara of Pesachim tells us. It tells us that on Erev Pesach, every Jew had to offer a korban, a sacrifice. They'd open the gates of the Azara, of the Bet HaMikdash, and they would cram in as many people as they could in order to enable them to offer their korban. Obviously, not everybody was able to fit into the Azara section, and there was a long line of people hoping to get in. Once the Azara was filled, they'd lock the gates, the people would offer their Erev Pesach korban, and then the gates would be opened again, and the second group of people would enter, and the same thing would happen. And they did this a third time as well in order to fit everybody in. Which means that somebody was going to be among the third group of people. There's no room for everybody. But guess what? The group that was let into the Azara, third, was nicknamed by the Rabbanim in the Gemara. That group was referred to as Kat Ha'atzlanim, the sect of the lazy ones, the lazy group. Well, why are they nicknamed in such a derogatory fashion? Lazy people. After all, they couldn't fit everybody into the Azara all at once. So some group was going to be third no matter what. Why call them Kat Ha'atzlanim? You know what the explanation may be? I'm going to give you an example of modern day times so that you understand. In the fall season, the Baseball World Series usually takes place. And for the Gentiles, for the Goyim, this is like for them the Yamim HaNoraim. It's a very important event for them. And as you could imagine, it's not so easy to acquire a ticket to the World Series. People would camp out next to the stadium and sleep in tents. Some of them even in just sleeping bags if they didn't have a tent. And they would do it the night before the ticket box office opens up because they wanted to be among the first to be able to purchase a ticket. These people were really moser nefesh, really went out of their way, sacrificed themselves to sleep out there in the cold weather, sometimes in terrible neighborhoods depending on where the stadium was, just in order to acquire a ticket for the World Series and not miss out. Well, perhaps that's what the Gemara is referring to, lahavdil, with this third group of people. Of course someone was going to be third. Not everybody can fit into the Azara. But if the Korban Pesach was really so important to them, they would have been there early enough to stand there with the first group of people who was let into the Azara. If a person is going to say to himself, what's the latest time that I could be there to catch the last round of the Korbanot? When was the last time? The deadline? If a person isn't rushing to fulfill the mitzvah and he ends up in the third group, that group is going to be rendered Kat Ha'atzlanim. Their passport is stamped with the word Atzlan, lazy. And although they offer the korban at the end of the day, they did offer it, their korban, their sacrifice, and the korban of the people in the first group is not the same korban at all. The mitzvah is not the same mitzvah because there is a qualitative difference between group number 1, group number 2, and group number 3. I'm going to tell you a story that I heard from Rabbi Mansour concerning his grandfather, Rabbi Yosef Safdi, alav shalom. Rabbi Mansour's grandfather was a man who had many wonderful midot, from what I heard. And one of his sterling qualities was this inyan that we're talking about, of zrizut, for the mitzvot, zeal. When his grandchildren used to come to visit him, he'd wake them up at 6:30 in the morning in order to begin their day. He himself had already woken up several hours before, davened, learned, and ate breakfast already. By 6:30 could have already davened mincha because of everything he had accomplished until 6:30 in the morning. But anyhow, Rabbi Mansour was telling us how he remembers how his grandfather used to wake them up early in the morning with the words of Sefer Mishle on his lips. Ad matai atzel tishan. Until will you sleep, lazy person? Lazy person? Until when will you sleep? It's 6:30 in the morning, Bichlal. What's going on over here? One time, Rabbi Mansour was zeicha to join his grandfather on a trip to Eretz Yisrael as a young teenager. And he recalls how it was not at all easy to spend time with his grandfather because the man barely slept. And while they were in Eretz Yisrael, his grandfather woke him up at 3:30 in the morning. And Rabbi Mansour remembers how he asked his grandfather, where in the world are we going to go at 3:30 in the morning? Everything is closed. And his grandfather said, we're going to attend the shiur of Chacham Yosef Ades alav shalom at the Kotel in Yerushalayim. And then we're going to daven shacharit at the next minyan there at the Kotel. Well, okay, they got up and they made it there to be the first to arrive, and they listened to the shiur and they davened at the rising of the sun at the Kotel. One morning, he says, while they were there, Rabbi Mansour woke up, he looked at the clock and he realizes, oh, it's 4:15. Oh my gosh, he realized that he and his grandfather overslept that day. So he jumped out of bed and he woke up his grandfather and he says to him, Saba, it's 4:15. And as a young man, Rabbi Mansour never forgot his grandfather's reaction. He told him, it's 4:15? Oh no, the whole day is shot. Can you imagine? For him, the entire day was altered because he was a man who taught himself to rise earlier than later so that he could accomplish as much as he could throughout the day. And that's, by the way, this concept is whether or not you're living in the Galut or in Eretz Yisrael. Really, I should say, especially if you're living in the Galut, outside of Eretz Yisrael, because over there, there's so much tumah, so much spiritual contamination that you do need to wake up earlier and do your avodat kodesh in order to combat all the negative influences that surround you day in and day out over there. But the point is that this is the inyan of having zeal and being diligent when engaging in a mitzvah. And with that thought in mind, I want to just take the time to thank all those women who every single time I talk about a campaign, and even if it's the same campaign that seems to drag out for weeks and weeks at a time, especially when it's important, many of you don't waste a minute. You don't waste a minute. You either pick up the phone and make your donation via calling the Ohel Sarah office. You log on to ohelsarah.com and you click on the donate button and you donate. Somehow, some way, you just find the opportunity, whether it's convenient or not, and you do what you need to do. And sometimes it's not even a need, but a want. And for me, that's even more important and overwhelms me so much. Purim is coming up, and we are on a mission. We need to collect a certain amount of money. I don't even want to tell you how much. And truth is, I hope to be coming in and make my round. I don't know what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has in mind. He's the boss. I'm just a shaliach. But you could be my shlichim as well. You could be zariz la mitzvah. You could have the zeal and the diligence to beat me to it and start making your donations before I even ask. You can start making the donations before I even have to get there, so that I have less to collect, which I have to say it makes it easier for me only from sometimes it's my job is not an easy job. Sometimes I do have to be honest, sometimes it's embarrassing to go around collecting, especially since I'm a woman. And luckily for me, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has been so kind to me through you and through so many donors that I can't even tell you how Hashem is so kind. He sees into my heart, I think, and He realizes how difficult it is for me sometimes as a woman going into somebody's house and asking and trying to explain things, and sometimes you don't have the time to explain to that person, not because you don't have the time, they don't have the time. It's Purim, everybody's rushed, people are coming in, sometimes you get pushed to the side. Only Hashem knows the things that we go through and the effort that's made to collect funds to help all the women and girls in Klal Yisrael. And Hashem has been so gracious and kind towards me, because these days, Baruch Hashem, I must say, I walk into a house, and most often, like I would say 95% of the time, they see me, they realize who it is, and before I even have to ask, they're already just writing out the checks. You know, I have tears in my eyes just thinking about the chesed that these people do, because they realize how hard it is to collect, and they spare me that feeling of having to tell the story again, and that, which by the way is for me, it's a great thing also, on the other hand also, because I realize that Hashem is telling me, no, I need you to make the effort, I need you to tell the story again, I need you to, that's part of your effort. But on the other hand, these people are coming forward and saying, no, it's okay, it's okay. And they're doing a big chesed with me. You're hearing this shiur, be zariz. Log on to allstar.com. Make your donation for Purim. And just write on the notes there, Purim donation, and Kadosh Baruch Hu should bless your zrizut with zrizut of His own. That all the things you need, and all the things you're yearning for, and all of the brachot that you need should be responded to quickly, diligently, and zealously. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should do for you midah keneged midah. He should respond to you in the same way you responded towards us. Log on to allstar.com, please, and make that Purim donation. And I want to thank those ladies who have been so gracious and kind towards us. Thank you so much. But ladies, that's the minyan of having zeal and being diligent when engaging in mitzvot. You know, Rav Chaim Kanievsky Shalita in his Sefer Ochot Yosher, he talks about this subject of zrizut. And he quotes a halacha, a very interesting halacha found in Yeridea, that talks about a person who made a neder, he made a vow to accomplish something by the end of the year. He took something upon himself, I'm going to get it done by the end of the year. And he even gives himself a specific date. But then, says Rav Chaim Kanievsky, life happened, and he pushed things off, thinking that he'd have enough time to accomplish his mission. But ultimately, he says, velo asahu. In the end, he did not end up fulfilling the mission that he vowed to accomplish. What happens halachically? And he writes that according to the Agudah, he's not considered an ones, which means he's not put into the category of people that are rendered, or people that as though life had them by the throat, and that's why they couldn't accomplish. No, that person isn't considered an ones, but rather he's deemed a poshea, a felon, and he's held responsible. But why? It says because according to the Agudah, if you set out to do something and you decide that, you know what, oh, don't worry, I'm going to have enough time, and you give yourself all kinds of excuses later on, oh, that you're busy with this and you're busy with that, and as a result of that, you inadvertently push off what you set out to do, this is an avon, this is an offense. If you set out to do something, he says you should try and do it as quickly as possible. He says you have to learn to be what Shlomo HaMelech tells us in Sefer Mishle. He says like this, Shlomo HaMelech, alav shalom. Hazita ish mahir b'melachto. Did you ever see a man quick to do his work? That person who's like, you see, he's like, doesn't waste a minute, he just does it. He says, well, you know what that person is going to be zeicha to? Lifnei melachim yityatzav. Such a person will merit to stand before kings. What does that mean? Ladies, a king needs someone who's loyal, devoted, and committed. When the king asks his loyal servant to do something, he knows he could rely on that servant to complete the task. But imagine a king who asks the servant the following day if he accomplished the task, and the servant tells him, Your Majesty, I couldn't. Well, certain things came up, and I got busy, I got caught up with other matters. What kind of servant is that? Shlomo HaMelech is telling us, by the way, that there's one thing the lazy person is not lazy about, and that's giving excuses. You know what I'm saying? The lazy person can come up with the most creative and original justifications for why he didn't do what he did. Boy, is he not lazy to give those excuses. That's the person who Shlomo HaMelech says wakes up in the morning and he says to himself, you know, I don't think I can go out today and accomplish my task because there might just be a lion standing outside my door. What lion? You're living in Brooklyn, for crying out loud. What lion? What lion? The lazy person comes up with all kinds of deterrents in order to avoid the challenge of conquering his laziness. I'm going to end with this thought, ladies. The Holy Chida, alav shalom, writes that when a person wakes up in the morning and the Yetzer Hara tries to keep him in bed, what should that person do? He writes, Haba lehorgecha, hashkem vehorgo. We have a Torah law that states that if the enemy comes forward in order to kill you, you must get up and kill him before he kills you. Says the Holy Chida, every morning the Yetzer Hara, your enemy, tries to destroy your spirituality by creating the mood of your day with the negative midah of atzlut, of laziness. He tries to coach you into staying in bed just a little longer. And once he coaches you and succeeds, the mode of that day becomes atzlut. He succeeded. Therefore, when the Yetzer Hara comes to you early in the morning in order to kill your inspiration, in order to slaughter your mood, in order to butcher your avodat hakodesh, you must get up. Hashkem v'horgo. You kill him. How do you kill him? Hashkem. Jump out of bed. Don't get up out of bed. You jump out of bed. As a matter of fact, one of the Gedolim wrote that one time when the Yetzer Hara told him one morning, why are you getting out of bed? What are you getting up for? And he answered the Yetzer Hara, you got up this morning, didn't you? You got out of bed this morning, no? If you got up in order to accomplish your task, I'm also going to get up to accomplish mine. Therefore, the first halakha in Shulchan Aruch is, Yitgaber ke'ari. Be strong like a lion. That's where it all begins, ladies. The root of the day begins with you gathering the strength of a lion to go forth towards that day. When Bilam HaRasha wanted to curse us and he blessed us instead, one of the praises of Am Yisrael that he spoke was, listen to these words, Hen am kelavi yakum. They are a people that rises like a lioness. V'cha'ari yitnaseh, and it raises itself like a lion. Even the evil but greatest Navi of the Gentile world of that time understood that Am Yisrael had that special quality of zrizut, of zealousness. We are a nation who rises early, not only to do, but to conquer. Our strength to accomplish and to succeed is like the strength of a lion. And that's what Chachamim say was the problem with the Nesi'im in Am Yisrael. There's no question that they were extremely generous in their donations of the Mishkan. No question. There's no question that they were well-intended, they had good kavanot. But still, says the Gemara in the Midrash, and especially because they were the leaders of the tribes, because they were supposed to be the role models of Avodat Hashem, they were penalized. Because deep down in the hidden chambers of the heart, that only HaKadosh Baruch Hu is privy to, Hashem saw that there was a small trace, a shemitz of laziness, of atzlut. The dust that they were made of influenced them. For that reason, their donations, although they were more valuable, were mentioned as number 11, which is the last on the list of donations offered towards the Mishkan. And that's fascinating, because the people who donated nechoshet, copper, which is the least valuable, the people who came with the buckets of pennies, that nechoshet was named as third on the list of the donations. Why? Because those people came very early in the morning in order to offer their nedava, their donations. Yeah, but what about me? I came with something that's worth 800,000 dinarim. Hashem says, you're going to be last. Why? Why? Because you only showed up at 7 o'clock at night. And although your intention was valid and admirable, but if there wasn't a small trace of laziness in you, and if you really had the same passion and zeal as you should have had, you would have been here at 6 o'clock in the morning. Because you're not supposed to be the one to make cheshbonot, to make all kinds of calculations when it concerns your avodat Hashem of, oh, well, we're going to wait and see and to calculate how much they still need and we still have time. You shouldn't be the one to make those calculations. You should just do. What an incredible musar this is, ladies. We have to learn to do things in a timely fashion. Our entire religion is based on time. There's a tchilat zman and a sof zman to many mitzvot. And we all do mitzvot. We're all engaged in mitzvot. We're all engaged in avodat kodesh. Doing the mitzvot is not the issue here at all. It's how we do the mitzvah and when we do the mitzvah. If you want the gold medal, you have to consider every second and fraction of a second, and that second has to matter to you. Yehi ratzon, ladies, that we should become more zrizim la'avodat haboreh, so that we could accomplish everything God has in store for our day and for our life. May we develop the strength of a lion, and not only engage in the mitzvot, but run to do them with fervor, with excitement, and with love. May our quick response and our enthusiasm to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah and His mitzvot be rewarded with the words of Shlomo HaMelech. Ish mahir b'melachto, lifnei melachim yityatzeh. That we will merit one day to stand before the King, HaMelech, who will look upon us and smile knowing that we were His devoted and truly loyal servants. May we be from the Zerizim who will accomplish the mitzvot bizmanam, betikunam, ubesha'atam. I want to wish you all a Shavua Tov, a Chodesh Tov, with tremendous simcha, hatzlacha, and beracha. Amen ken, yehi ratzon.